All right, hello everybody. Um, it's good to be back in Quabba Hall in St. Petersburg. Um, it's this historic building, historic for the struggle for, the anti-colonial struggle for democracy. As noted, I'm the international president for the International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement. And then I want to salute leadership, Chairman Omali Yeshitela, founder of the International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement. It's in his address to the International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement. So at that time called the National People's Democratic Uhuru Movement, just 2 days ago, April 6th, 1991 in Chicago, Illinois. So we know that April 6, 1991, April 6th was the 23rd anniversary of the state assassination of little Bobby Hutton. Of course, his niece was a member of the International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement and was, if I'm correct, here that day in 1996 when the state attacked and attempt to burn down this building and attempt to assassinate our leadership and wipe this off the face, but also in Chicago, Illinois, where Mark Clark and Fred Hampton were killed. Of course, many people know that his widow and his son were founding members of at that time, the National People's Democratic Uhuru Movement. But I also think that it's important to underscore the predecessor organization, the People's Democratic Uhuru Movement, formed a few years before that in Oakland, California, as a part of a defense of the African community to push back the counterinsurgency that had so many people demoralized that the chairman and others have described as when they came into Oakland, seeing people literally walking around in a sort of a daze. In many ways, that's not the Oakland people remember nowadays. That's not the Oakland people remember, and it's because of the Uhuru movements, because of the parties, because of the mass strategy to bring people back into political life that was put into play over 40 years ago when that became the headquarters of the Uhuru movement at that time. I say that because I was, I've told the story many times, but I was in high school viewing some colleges up north, and we were on a bus, me and a bunch of other African students from Southern California, were driving north on MacArthur Boulevard. To the left, we saw this building, right? Sort of goldenrod colored building with African leaders on the front of it that included Huey. Said, man, what's that building right there? And someone says, that's the Black Panther headquarters. And we was like, oh man, that's Black Panther headquarters. That's cool. So I went to school, college and all that, started reading books. And they said, Black Panthers were founded in West Oakland. I was like, that's not true. I passed the Black Panther headquarters. This is East Oakland, 79. Not too far from Eastmount Mall. Then I started listening to hip hop, reading about chairman and everything. And I said, oh, shoot, that was the Uhuru House that I founded. So we are at Uhuru House. That was the Uhuru House, but that is not just a mistake. That is because it is this movement towards African liberation that was revived, right, for me and these other African students to interact with from Southern California and usher us back into political life, to let us know that, what they meant to defeat back in 68, 69, when over 30 members of the Black Panther Party alone were assassinated by the state, hundreds, if not thousands more in prison. People like Rochelle McGee right now still in prison over 50 years. And some of the people that got out in the movement that was meant to free Rochelle McGee act like the man don't even exist. So that is a very, very important. So we got this anti-colonial struggle for democracy, right? And this is important. It's important that we've established the fact that there's multiple ideas of democracy. Democracy in itself simply means the people govern, right? But what people? And what are they governing, right? When a board execs from a bank go into a bank and take a vote to take your house, I guess that's a form of democracy as well. That's a colonial democracy. So instead, we talking about an anti-colonial struggle for democracy like I said, it was at that convention that Chairman Omar Teller said that self-determination is the highest form of democracy. And that's the purpose of the International People's Democratic Uhuru movement. But as a part of this, it's also important for us to understand Comrade Amilcar Cabral, right? Because it's Amilcar Cabral in his address to Portuguese, to the Portuguese left, in which he told them that it is in fact, he says that we must affirm clearly that while being opposed to all fascism, our peoples are not fighting Portuguese fascism. We are fighting Portuguese colonialism. And we see some people try to flip that around and say Africans was the first ones to suffer from fascism and all this other stuff. Still centering, this sort of white left analysis. They're trying to find a way for Africans to fit this African peg into this white hole. As opposed to, but he says the destruction of fascism, in Portugal must be the work of the Portuguese people themselves, because that's the other question about the struggle for democracy, right? Whether it's the left or the right, their goal is to make us solve their problems, because they know they don't got enough people. They know they ain't got enough white women to solve the problems for the progressive white women. So they want African women to solve the problems for progressive white women. Call it feminism, right? They want African workers to solve the problem for progressive white workers. Call it Marxism, right? And then when Marcus Garvey pushed back against that and said, hey, the people that didn't want you to have a job yesterday and was killing you, now they want you to join their work organizations. Marcus Garvey pushed back against that. They said Marcus Garvey was anti-communist, which didn't even make any sense. Didn't even make any sense. And we still see that process taking place nowadays, right? We're talking about the anti-colonial move towards independence, right? In 1776, when they issued their Declaration of Separatism, is that what it was called? No, right? When the colonizers fight against the colonizers, they call that independence. But when we fight against colonizers, they call it separatism, right? So it's important for us to understand that. There's a couple different things. I know I'm running a little bit short on time, but I want to say that I've been doing some research recently. I want to lift up an African woman, Ida B. Wells. I don't think she gets lifted up enough, right? Ida B. Wells saw very clearly the colonial contradiction and the violence that African people face, and put forward in a great book called The Red Record, an anti-colonial struggle for democracy. What it means to struggle for the democratic rights of African people in this book. A lot of people tend to look at and they'll look at it as a record of the lynchings. That's part of it. But the very end of that book is her political program, right? She's got a political program. That's part of it. But she's got another book called Southern Horrors, in which she says that the best friend African people could have is a Winchester rifle. That's right. That's important. So Southern Horrors, written right after she had witnessed the lynching of her friend. She described the lynching of her friends, a scene of shocking savagery that would have disgraced the Congo. Yeah. This is a woman. This is a sister who wrote in solidarity with Antonio Maceo in Cuban independence. Not too far that way, right? She wrote about this. That's not what they tell us. That's not what they tell us. Which to me, also this anti-colonial struggle for democracy is also one that is the anti-colonial struggle for the telling of our own history, and that includes the history of the civil rights movement. Because even forces within the African community will try to warp that story to just be another old sort of a system of negotiation, be it violent negotiation like we saw some parties engage in South Africa, or nonviolent negotiation. In all that, what we're simply talking about is tactics, right? But we're talking about strategy. The anti-colonial struggle for democracy is about a strategic thrust towards African independence, That's what the International People's Democratic Uhuru movement is, and that's what the Black Community Control of Police demand itself also represents. How am I doing on time? Uhuru. So, as a part of that struggle, International People's Democratic Uhuru movement engaged, starting partially in this city right here 7 years ago, with the Black community, the Africans Charged Genocide campaign, right? That's a part of that struggle for democracy that stands on the shoulders of the campaign led by Ida B. Wells, the campaign led by people like Paul Robeson, Du Bois, and the lawyer William Patterson, and them. But we were attacked the exact same reason they were attacked, right? For an attempt to sever the ties that bind us to the colonial capitalist system, not because it will kill us, but because it will kill the system. And that's what we have to understand. The true irony of the genocide is the sucking of our life blood so that they can live off of us. But as we sever that host, right, we must sever that host for us to live. So they took 130,000 of our signatures, change.org, alongside the Federal Bureau of Investigation, in tandem, just like Regions Bank, in tandem with the Federal Bureau of Investigations have attacked us. But like I said, but the way forward is precisely what we heard about today, is to bring the masses of African people back into political life. Chairman Omali Yeshitela says in the Tactics and Strategies pamphlet published in 1977 that the first task of us is to bring African people back, win African people back to the position of independence. But the thing that I also leave with is, he says, just because they have not been won to the position of independence, do not assume that they are anti-independence, right? And because they are not. Africans are doing everything they can to exist outside of this colonial system, but that's the importance. We literally have to bring them to this building, if you're in St. Petersburg, Florida, but to the dual and contending power institutions that we have created as a part of that struggle for anti-colonial struggle for democracy. So Uhuru, everybody, thank you for letting me be on this panel, and salute to everybody who's watching.